It's really cheap right now.
Yeah.
So I have to do that. So and my parents were here this weekend,
Oh.
so I didn't really get it done because I was like trying to last time with them before graduation. And then I cried a little bit when I left, but yeah.
What?
I actually read a lot about this. I don't hold this right now.
Next time my parents see me, they're gonna call me a scientist.
Man,
I don't think when my son leaves, I don't think I'll ever talk to him. I don't, well, I'll talk to him, I don't think he'll talk to me.
Once they go to Europe, they never come back. It's because our dollar is so much valuable there.
No, it's because he doesn't like us.
Well, that's like the same thing.
Don't worry, I will say, like, I wasn't as close to my parents when I left. Honestly, I kind of like slowly got closer, like the further apart. I got close to them by. He could change his mind.
We can all make this next year to see how often he actually like, either sends me a message or calls.
I thought parents don't want their kids to call.
Oh, no, I don't want him living with me, but it'll be nice to be called. Be fun game.
They'll just text you, Mom, I need money.
Kind of when I was pregnant with him, the students all had a pool as to like when he'd be born. And then now we can do the pool when he's leaving. Will he?
Bro, if that happened like 2023, there'd be like a money line. There'd be a whole sports book.
There'd be an app for it.
I would develop. Some would say I would develop a neural network. Did it run too bad again?
No, I'm stressing out, saying that she's the only hope we have for the Monday forecast. So excited forecast.
Well, she's about to get ready for what you're going.
Wait, who's going this next Monday? Which one of you is volunteering for next Monday?
Huh?
I think one of the graduates should do it next Monday.
I'll do it. Yeah, me and Brian got it. I'll just make it,
No,
Me and Kevin will give our
cancel
roommate.
him,
I don't think we can.
cancel him. and
I'm looking
cancel
forward to that
him. Want to see how good that'll be.
Wait, Kevin, Kevin be issuing a roommate forecast.
yeah, the roommate
There you
forecast.
go.
We'll call it 2 brain cells. One for each.
I think that'd be better.
Yeah.
You are aware that I'm planning on.
Okay, never mind, they both call me Kevin clearly.
Oh, wow.
Kevin, why are you complimenting me?
I'm under control.
All set?
Yep.
Sweet.
Do you think I have a lot of?
All right.
How's Kevin sitting in the-
Nice little tight knit crew today.
Sorry, Mr. President.
Yeah, it's okay. Hope everyone's looking forward to the warm weather this week. I think we have two more briefings after this, so coming down to the end of the semester here. Today we have Ben Reppert. Thank you, Ben, for coming in today. Happy to have you. I'll let you just take it away whenever you're ready.
Appreciate the moral support from all the students back there and the ever-present visit from Mr. Vicelio in the back. And Marissa brought goodies, so if you haven't gotten them yet.
Dr. Vicelio?
Sorry, Dr. Vicelio. It's okay. I get that at home too. Please come up here and eat goodies because the longer they sit here right in front of me, the more of them I'll be tempted to eat. I always enjoy doing one of these every semester. This is probably one of the most, relatively speaking, near-term, boring and straight. I don't know. Let's actually, turn this on. This is probably one of the most boring and straightforward near-term forecasts I've had to deal with when doing one of these. So I figured we'd start out by doing a little bit of recent weather, and then I'll jump into the forecast. This, of course, has been in honor of a longtime AccuWeather forecaster, Ken Reeves, for a while now. Really nice guy, really great forecaster, and I think it's been more than a decade now that Ken has passed, maybe even 12 years by now. But timely and in the spirit of AccuWeather, if any of you had not had the opportunity to go on the SUBAM's tour of AccuWeather, just wanted to also put in this quick plug that the local AMS chapter here has another opportunity to get you out to AccuWeather tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Busy time of year. I'm sure some of you don't necessarily have interest, or you've been there already, or you got there already. But for anyone who is still in the market or looking for a tour of AccuWeather, tomorrow night is an opportunity. 6 o'clock. There's a QR code there on the screen. This is also bumbling around on social media. If anyone has any interest, though, and you don't get a chance to scan the QR code here, just feel free to let me know. So today, before we get to the forecast, we'll talk about how it's been somewhat quietly getting quite dry around most of the state recently, and at a time of the year where that can actually start to cause some problems. If any of you need a refresher from, say, Meteo 415 or 416, I think modified persistence is actually a pretty good forecasting technique this week. We'll preview, of course, the blue-white weekend, and then a quick glance at the long range as well. But first things first, mentioned it's been getting somewhat dry through most of Pennsylvania. Northwestern corner, if you're up by Erie, Crawford County, Warren County, McKean County, up there it's not quite so much of a story, but the southeastern 4/5 of the state, year to date now, running a pretty good deficit in precipitation. That is most notably evident over just the past 30 days, where that deep red color from around here and then most of eastern Pennsylvania, just about a quarter to half of average precipitation over the past month. Things, of course, are really in the process of blooming now and greening up, so it's not exactly evident yet in the vegetation, but if we don't turn this around here pretty soon, things could easily start to wilt before they get going too badly, or if not burn, with an elevated fire danger. No burning this week. The drought monitor has some color that has reappeared on it. We're now, what's that, 11 and some % of the state, mostly centered on the lower Susquehanna Valley, is now considered abnormally dry. That's the highest percentage of the state since back in the second week of November when this product is issued. So largely, again, thanks to this dry start to the year, and especially the last 4 to 6 weeks or so in eastern Pennsylvania, it has been notably dry. So for most sites, the last measurable rain was April 6th. That was with the front that came through late Wednesday into Thursday. For far western areas, the last measurable rain was the 5th. Far eastern areas, it was mostly the 6th. But the next time that we have the opportunity for really anything measurable on a widespread level is maybe Saturday, if not waiting until Sunday or Monday. But nevertheless, I thought this was a bit interesting, so I just purely asked myself the question, is a 9-day dry spell in April that common? My hunch was no, so I decided to give that a little bit more of a look. So again, on average, some site-specific areas, this might not be quite 9 days, might be 8. But point here being, generally going from the 6th to the 15th of April without measurable precipitation is a 9-day dry spell in April, somewhat rare. This is a little hard to see, but I used Allentown to represent the East, State College for the central areas, and Pittsburgh for the West. Looking at April here, calendar goes from left to right. This is a frequency distribution. I'll actually give you some years next, but on average in Allentown, representing the East, in early to mid-April, on average, roughly, about 6%, or about once in every 17 years, we'll say it that way. About once in every 17 years, you get a dry spell that lasts 9 days in April. It's a little less frequent in State College. If you roughly eyeball that, it's maybe more like 4% of the time in April, about once every 25 years. And in Pittsburgh, it's even a little bit less, say about once in every 33 years. Interestingly enough, I did find it somewhat comical that in mid-April in both State College and Allentown, there is this relative peak, but I think that's just a little bit of noise that otherwise would smooth out. But the years in white here for these select cities are the last time that there was a 9-day dry spell in April. And if any of these cities manage to go until that next front comes through here, which looks to be about next Monday, Sunday into Monday, the orange years are if it manages to become an 11-day dry spell in April. Large message here is long dry spells in April are not that common. 2016 is the last year that a lot of the sites had a 9-day dry spell. And then once you add days in 1-day increments beyond that, you really have to start going back. On a widespread level, for most of these sites, it was 2005 that a dry spell in April lasted to 11 days. So turning dry, I think that this dry spell, however long it lasts, gets interrupted between now and a week from now in some form or another. But then after that, it does look like we go into a relative dry period once again. Let's get into some weather first. I mentioned that I think this week is a classic week where you can use modified persistence as a good forecasting tool. I'll get back to that in a minute. But for any refreshers on, has everyone in here had at least 415, maybe? Yeah, even if you haven't, there's a technique in meteorology, persistence forecasting, where if not much is changing in the overall weather pattern, you just assume what's happening today would happen again tomorrow, sort of like the copy and paste. But in a little bit here, I'll mention how this week, I think the idea of modified persistence will be a pretty good forecasting tool. Current weather right now, area of high pressure is pretty much sitting right over us, helping to keep our skies relatively clear after a very beautiful but seasonably cool to seasonably comfortable weekend. Right now, the immediate weather system of remote interest to us, area of low pressure right now that is just up off the screen. It's sitting over Hudson Bay. That's going to track southeast toward Maine by later tomorrow. These clouds associated with it here, they're associated with a weak cold front that'll attempt to get into Pennsylvania late tomorrow into Wednesday, not with a lot of fanfare. Some of the energy at the tail end of this front looks to eventually get cut off down in the deep south, a cutoff area of low pressure that'll meander down there a few days before trying to come north around blue and white festivities on Saturday, but not totally, I'm not overly excited about any fanfare with that system. But for right now, high pressure in control, a lot of clear sky. This is the next system that will begin approaching on tomorrow, later in the afternoon into the evening. Sun rising on the still extensive snowpack in the western mountains as well. If we back this up a couple of hours, this was 10Z, so 6 a.m., just before the sun started coming up. Cool morning. A lot of areas in northern Pennsylvania, once again, dropping below freezing into the 20s to around freezing as you head farther south. Southern Pennsylvania, especially southeastern Pennsylvania, it was more like mid to upper 30s for the overnight lows last night. This is a weather pattern, at least the next couple days here, and the past couple for that matter, we've had quite a variation in the daily diurnal range in temperature. Cool mornings, largely below freezing, and then afternoons that have managed to get into the 50s, if not the 60s. So especially when it's been relatively dry as it has been, you have that ability to cool down pretty effectively at night and also warm up a little extra effectively during the day. So large diurnal ranges have been the theme, and at least for the next couple of days should continue to be the theme. Current observation here in Happy Valley, we're up to 46, probably on our way into the middle to upper 60s today. You'll notice that largely the winds are quite light, either calm to 5, maybe 10 miles per hour right now in a few spots like Philadelphia reporting 10-mile-an-hour winds. But with an area of high pressure essentially parked right on top of us, we've got light winds, if not a slight northerly flow. As the high starts moving, these winds will very quickly and eventually turn southerly and southwesterly, allowing us to warm up quite substantially around here. Radar-wise locally, all is quiet. Some showers still off the Outer Banks associated with the front end system that really made for an awful day at the Masters on Saturday. Here are some rain showers associated with a cold front, that cold front attached to that low that's currently up over Hudson Bay. Not a lot of fanfare with these, and as this front continues to move eastward, these showers should become even less and less impressive by the time they attempt to get here later tomorrow. So really not expecting any precipitation measurable with this front as we head into late tomorrow and tomorrow night. All right, where are we here? So, which tab would I look first? So this is, I show this I think every time I do a briefing, but for anyone who needs another source of weather data, I'm always a proponent for Tomer Berg's polar weather website. It's got a lot of good stuff. You've got a lot of different progs to pick from as far as the models are concerned, but then you can also overlay things like station models, observations. It's a really cool website. But going forward in time, if we just take a quick look at the large-scale weather pattern that's going on. This is the 500 millibar pattern right now. Vorticity is plotted along with the height lines. Trough off the eastern seaboard, that's associated with that weekend system that mainly stayed to our south. We are just downstream of, well, essentially right underneath a ridge of high pressure aloft, responsible for our bright blue skies and relatively comfortable weather. Over upstream, over the Great Lakes right now, this is some of the energy associated with the upper level trough with the surface front and the area of low pressure up over Hudson Bay. If we slide ahead to tomorrow, this is early tomorrow, it's just up off the screen, but the energy with the parent area of low pressure is trying to approach far northern New England, but still staying into far eastern Canada. This is what's going to be dragging that struggling front close to us, and the front really just sort of washes out. The energy at the tail end of that front is down here. This starts to get cut off from the upper level flow by the time we get to Wednesday. I know a few days ago there were some questions, could this turn into some tropical system? I saw social media coming abuzz with, the first tropical system of the season. For what it's worth, there is some baroclinicity down here. There is a temperature gradient. So if this thing turns into some sort of organized area of low pressure, it is not exactly going to be a warm core system. There is a surface stationary front of sorts that will be present over the northern Gulf of Mexico. So if anything were to come of this system later this week, it would be subtropical. I personally don't think we even get there, and the Hurricane Center is not enthused by anything at all. But could something subtropical form mid to late week? I would argue no, but would it surprise me? Also not necessarily, but I'd be leaning no right now. This system, whatever comes of it, again, I'm on the no name train, but by the time we get to the end of the week, this system will eventually start lifting northward. Until we get there though, Pennsylvania remains downstream of what will be a big ridge that will be developing here over the northern plains into the Midwest and Great Lakes. That's an area that is very conducive to high pressure at the surface. If your upper level ridge axis is here, you tend to find an area of surface high pressure to the east of that, and that's where we are. So after this front passes through late tomorrow into Wednesday, we're essentially under the influence of a big ridge of high pressure again for Wednesday. Now here's Thursday, same story. This system is still just sort of spinning about down near the Gulf Coast. By the time we get to Friday, we're still essentially underneath the crest of this ridge as this system starts moving up from the south. Notice though, we go from a closed area of heights at 500 millibars, and then this wave starts to open up and lose its steam as it starts coming northward. So for blue-white festivities, by the time we get to Saturday, I certainly don't think it's going to be a washout in terms of rain. I'm not even that convinced that it rains at all, and if it does, I think it would tend to be earlier in the day as opposed to later. Let's just fast forward to early afternoon here. This would be 2 o'clock on Saturday. Almost very little reflection of that system in the upper level height lines. There is some vorticity around, so For Saturday morning, most of Saturday morning, we do have some positive vorticity advection. We're on the business end of, if you can call this an upper level trough, which technically you can. We are on the business end of it, but granted, this is 8 in the morning Saturday. So if it has a chance to rain here, I think it would have to do it pre-dawn Saturday or around or just after dawn, sometime in the morning hours when we're still on the east side of this little wrinkle at 500 millibars. By the time we get to Saturday afternoon, it continues to lose its steam, and if you sort of squint and maybe step away from the computer screen so you can't see it as well. By Saturday afternoon, we're sort of behind the center of that trough, so to speak. So certainly I think some clouds will be around by the time we get to Saturday. I don't know that it's going to be the sunniest day, but I don't necessarily think that any, or certainly not much rain can come of this system. The more impressive system for us will then wait until late Sunday and Monday. European's a little deeper with this, at least the deterministic European is a little deeper with this system. That's what I'm showing you here. This is the Euro, but fairly deep trough aloft, digging into the Great Lakes by the time we get to late Sunday and early Monday. European model's opinion on this is that basically takes until late Monday and Tuesday for this trough to actually come through. So European model, as far as the surface features that would be coming through, a little bit slower than, say, the GFS model, which if we bring that up, here's the GFS. This is Sunday again. Not quite as deep with this trough. Still has a pretty potent area of low pressure coming through, a lot of energy at the center of this upper level shortwave trough. This orientation a little bit different, but generally speaking, it tries to bring it through about 12 hours earlier than the European. So this would be more of a late Sunday into Monday type frontal passage if the GFS is right, versus the European, it would be more like a later Monday type situation. So as far as precip is concerned, I wanted to address that first before talking temps. It's maybe Saturday morning as this upper level low that sits over the Gulf for most of the week comes northward, opens up and weakens. I certainly think it will rain with this system that comes in by the time we get to that late Sunday and Monday time frame. We switch to relative humidity here at 700 millibars. Today, a lot of dry air in the mid-levels and ground truth outside. At least from where I'm standing, I don't see a single cloud out there. So that's pretty much par for the course today. Here is the higher 700 millibar relative humidity associated with the clouds along the front. This is also that same reflection here, but as already advertised, this front will continue to lose its luster as it comes eastward. So a lot of dry air in place through tonight. Later tomorrow, it doesn't even really show up as high relative humidity in the mid-levels. It just shows up as less low, so to speak. So later tomorrow, I think Tuesday is brighter in the morning. There's probably some increasing mid-level clouds in the afternoon as what's left of this front gets into northern Pennsylvania. Those clouds could linger into the first half of Wednesday. Here's when some high values of mid-level relative humidity get into here, especially central and northern Pennsylvania. So while tomorrow probably starts very bright and gets a little cloudier later in the day, Wednesday probably starts with some clouds and then gets brighter as the day goes on. Once we get that, whatever's left of the front to move east, here's this big area of high pressure aloft, at least the reflection of it starting to take shape once again. A lot of dry, sinking air that will also help us to warm up later this week too. So later Wednesday, and then especially Thursday and Friday, I think you're going to have, once again, a very hard time finding many clouds in the sky with this big area of high pressure really dominating our weather. And then we wait for some of this moisture associated with that Gulf system to start coming up here later Friday. At least most of the models agree on the general timing of this. Probably by late Friday into Friday evening, it starts to become dull in western Pennsylvania. As we get into the beginning part of the weekend, there's certainly a lot more moisture around compared to the end of the week. So Saturday, I'm not convinced it's an overly bright day. I'd call it mostly cloudy right now if I had to put a term to it. But despite all this moisture around in the mid-levels, I still think if it's going to rain, it has to do it early in the morning. But generally speaking, cloudy. It'll still be warm. But as far as any of you going to blue-white festivities, whether that's the game or your festivities take you downtown, whatever it may be, I don't think you need the umbrella. I also don't know that you need a ton of sunscreen, but that being said, mostly cloudy still implies that the sun, I think, will be out at times. So don't go to blue-white and do what some of the classes that have preceded you do. They go to blue-white on a sunny 50-degree April day and come back as lobsters. So if Saturday's forecast turns brighter between now and then especially, don't overlook the sunscreen. Again, this is the GFS interpretation of then what comes afterwards. The GFS model a little faster with the surface features, bringing what would be a pretty strong cold front through late Sunday into Monday. That's the moisture associated with it. We'll switch to the surface here in a moment. But if the GFS is right, the frontal passage late Sunday to Monday, and then we get into that regime where, as it stands right now, early next week, certainly more reminiscent of early spring than late spring. Still on the business end of the main upper level trough, much colder air mass. That's probably a time early next week where you don't see the sun a whole lot. Could be some instability and even lake-enhanced rain and lake-enhanced snow showers if the air is cold enough, which for a brief window in there, especially later Monday, it does look like it is. So I think the next main story beyond the warmth this week will be the snapback by the time we get to early next week. Continuing to get lower in the atmosphere. This is now 850. This is where I think that this modified persistence idea is a perfectly good forecasting tool this week, where we're essentially under the influence of the same upper level ridge from today right through Friday. It changes its orientation a little bit, but if you looked at nothing else other than what is the overall air mass doing, and to do that, I'm just going to use 850 to illustrate. If you only had the time to look at 850 millibar temperatures to figure out what was going to be going on, we'll see here that the 850 millibar temps go up 2, 3, 4 degrees Celsius per day through Friday. And with not a whole lot else changing, if you had to make a forecast really quick, take what's going on today, add several degrees for tomorrow, add several more for Wednesday, add several more for Thursday, add several more for Friday, and you'd probably be in the ballpark without doing anything else. So 850 millibar temps today are 1, 2, 3-ish. I actually wrote down the numbers for State College. Roughly speaking, the temp at 850 today would be about 3 Celsius. That is in the light greens for those of you going off the color scale, which I guess I can complete the picture there for you. By tomorrow, that did absolutely nothing. Let's see, what time are we at? By tomorrow afternoon, again, here's the reflection of the big area of high pressure. We've gone from really light green to slightly darker green. And based on the sounding I looked at before for State College, Tuesday's 850 temp is roughly 6 Celsius. By Wednesday afternoon, in the wake of that front, that's actually when we start to really warm up more effectively. Wednesdays for State College, roughly 8 Celsius. And then keep an eye out here to the west. Coming over the crest of this ridge, that's where the real anomalous warmth with the upcoming warm pattern starts burgeoning and moving eastward. So Thursday, roughly speaking, 850 millibar temp, about 11 Celsius. And then Friday, when our warmth around here peaks, it's more like 13. So with 850 millibar temperatures each day going up a couple of degrees from the day before, at the surface, that'll translate to a very similar pattern. So adding a couple degrees each day will, generally speaking, get you in the ballpark. As far as do records need to enter the conversation? At the end of the week, I think we do have to at least put it in the conversation. This is now showing essentially the ranking of 850 millibar temperatures over the historical record. It's basically based on the model output. How does the 850 millibar temperature forecast compare when we look at all the 850 millibars of temperatures in the past? Anything that starts getting shaded in any kind of red color, that's when you start getting into the top 10%. The deepest reds here is when you're really within the top 1%. And then if purples show up, it's basically the model forecasting a record 850 millibar temperature. So later this week, let's see when this, so this is Thursday morning. By the time we get to Thursday afternoon, this is an anomalous air mass around here. The most anomalous part of the air mass actually looks to go to our north over New England, where these red colors start getting deeper. By the time we get to Friday, Friday's when our warmth peaks, especially in eastern Pennsylvania, and where some of these reds get deeper and deeper. That's where records, I think, are especially in the conversation, far southern New England up toward the Boston area. But around here too, because it's been dry and we haven't fully bloomed yet outside, sunny, warm, well-mixed days, pre-vegetation, during a dry pattern, I'd be inclined to, if I were making forecasts this week, I would go over guidance by a few degrees. Just strikes me as one of those weeks where high temperatures especially can probably overperform by a couple degrees. And that, I think, is what puts records in Pennsylvania in the conversation. For what it's worth, ooh, quick, pop quiz. I'm not even going to tell you Friday's date. If you were interested in knowing if we were going to break a record high in State College with the weather that we experience on Friday, what date would you need to look at to see what the record was? Saturday. Yes, perfect. So Saturday is the 15th. So for what it's worth, there you go. That's Friday being our warmest day here. I think that's the best chance we have of flirting with or maybe even breaking a record. Our record for the 15th, because Friday's weather will go down on Saturday's obs card, which is the 15th. Our record high here is 84, set 5 years ago. I don't know that today I would forecast 84 in State College for Friday, but that is certainly not out of the realm of possibilities, if you ask me. Maybe do we fall a couple degrees short? Probably. The stations in Pennsylvania that have shorter periods of record, records will be in the conversation for them later this week. I saw Bradford only has to get to, I think, 77 on Thursday and Friday. Stations with shorter periods of record, if you're doing any forecasting for Bradford, Du Bois, the Johnstowns of the state, record highs there probably happen just because they have a shorter period of record, but I think records are in the conversation for most of us. Even at night too, if we look at record high lows, in the period in question here, upper 50s to around 60, I think because it has been so dry as of late, I don't think we stay overly warm at night per se. I don't think we stay at or above 60 to have a chance at these, but this 55 there for this 55 there for the 13, that could certainly be in jeopardy. That's a relatively weak record in between some others. So it's an anomalously warm air mass, that's for sure. I think the warmest part of it goes to our north. But thanks to the recent dryness and the fact that we don't have full-blown vegetation yet that's evapotranspirating. That's evapotranspiring, yeah, words. Just making stuff up, but I think basically taking model guidance, but then assuming we can overperform it by a few degrees, I think that's what puts records in the conversation for Pennsylvania. So quick look at surface features now. Here's this afternoon. There's the area of high pressure that is at least modeled to be centered just, say, Ocean City, Maryland. By the time we get to tomorrow afternoon, there's that area of low pressure that's moving through eastern Canada. I think this is the European, but most of the models in general agreement that you essentially need to be near the Canadian-US border to have a chance at precip because the front coming through essentially washes out and falls apart. After that, Wednesday, the warm air really starts to come in. GFS is trying to spit out some very, very light precipitation amounts in northern Pennsylvania as the even warmer air mass arrives, but wouldn't really expect much to come out of that. And then later this week, we're being influenced by that high pressure, which has now, or will then be centered off the southeast coast. There's that area of low pressure forming over the Gulf. Southern states around the Gulf Coast, they'll probably get a fair amount of rain out of this late this week. Then as the system moves north and starts falling apart, the rain does too. This is 8 a.m. Saturday as far as the European model's opinion goes. Some showers around. Again, I think if it's going to rain Saturday, that's when it needs to do it. After that, granted, the European's a little more bullish with this system, but some of the other models too just have still a fair amount of dry air in place, relatively speaking. I'll pull up a sounding for Saturday afternoon. Showed you 700 millibar relative humidity before. There's that moisture in the mid-levels, but generally speaking, especially because it's been so dry as of late, models as well are also showing a fairly robust, I'll call out that word for you guys, a fairly robust amount of dry air in different layers of the atmosphere, and especially at the surface. So we back this up to Saturday morning. This is 8 a.m. Less dry air in place. Again, I think if it's going to rain, that's when it has to do it. Saturday afternoon, quite a bit of clouds around. This sounding certainly would not be a sunny sounding. A lot of high and mid-level clouds around, but I think it has a hard time. Raining. Let's see, what else did I have I wanted to show? As far as the long range is concerned, this is, where are we here? So this is next late Sunday. This is Sunday evening. This is the GFS ensemble, the Canadian ensemble, and the European ensemble, the height fields. Fairly multi-model, widespread agreement on that next system coming in sometime in that late Sunday, early Monday timeframe. Fairly sharp trough coming in. And then for a few days early next week, till we get this trough to leave, this is now late Tuesday. We're still near, if not, if you ignore the Canadian ensemble, the European and GFS both suggest that we're still on the business end of the upper level trough. A lot of cool air aloft in place. So early next week certainly a stark contrast from what's happening outside right now. Probably a much less bright time, a lot of clouds, some instability, rain, and potentially snow showers up once you get into northwestern Pennsylvania. So the regime early next week, about as different as you can get from the current regime and the regime that's coming. Then once we get that to leave for a lot of the longer range, generally speaking, it looks like another ridge tries to build, likely centered a bit to our west, which would tend to put us on the east side of that ridge axis, which favors generally speaking, surface high pressure. And notice by this point too, there's fairly good agreement that as far as the upper level heights are concerned, most of the heights are above average. So on balance, once we get past this system early next week and a few days that look pretty crummy, pattern generally to me looks like it'll return to one that certainly favors mild and certainly favors dry out into mid to late April. For what it's worth, not that I trust anything 360 hours out, but the fact that all three model suites at this point, generally speaking, have a ridge somewhere near us or to our west, I'd favor warm and dry to close out the end of April. And for what it's worth, the Climate Prediction Center agrees with that too. Here's your 8 to 14 day outlook. This is 17th to the 23rd. Some of the early next week's cool shot will probably have a few below average days next week, Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. But on balance, when you average the whole period, Climate Prediction Center favors warmth. And then the experimental week 3 to 4 outlook. This would be the last week or so of April and the first week or so of October. Yeah, first week or so of May. Again, the favor right now is mild east, and they also have the expectation or favoring below average precipitation near us or just to our west. So aside from a multi-day hiccup early next week with the return of some cool windy weather and also some rain, maybe with some snow showers, I think largely much of the rest of this month is on the milder side of average and generally speaking on the drier side of average. And that pretty much encompasses everything I had to talk about. Does anybody have any questions for me or want to disagree with me on anything I said or want me to clarify anything? Happy to take questions or pull anything else up. Yes.
I have a comment, but it's not very exciting. It was just something I noticed this morning. Just a week ago in the Northern Plains, they were dealing with a blizzard, and today and tomorrow they may have record highs.
Yeah, so quite the turnaround. And of course, it is the time of the year that the plains can go through those pretty wild swings where, winter's trying to hang on, but then if you get the warm air mass to show up in the right spot, there you go too. I just had this already up, but as far as the air mass in the northern plains the next couple of days, almost as warm as it gets for mid-April up there. So that'll certainly melt what has been a very unusually long and persistent snowpack. So something else, that's a good point. I'm glad Marissa brought this up. You'll probably start to hear some news about river flooding in the central and northern plains before this week is done, because an air mass this warm up there, that's going to lead to a rapid melting of what's been a deep snowpack. Let's check in on Bismarck really quick. Bismarck's had snow since
November 11th or something like that.
Yeah, so Bismarck still has more than a foot of snow on the ground, and with temperatures, I don't know what that actually translates to. So if you get 70s and 80s into the Dakotas and you've got a 1 to 2 foot snowpack to melt, that'll lead to some river rises. Here, for what it's worth, here's the current blend for State College. This is what modified persistence looks like on a model. It's pretty similar story each day, just tick it up by a few degrees. The blend right now on Friday is going 83 for here. I also meant to mention this too, especially any of you on the CWS forecasting shift. In southeastern Pennsylvania, I would also literally have a hot take that I think somebody in the state absolutely gets to 90 on Friday. I don't know that it's Philadelphia officially because the Philadelphia ASOS sensor sits just north of the Delaware River, and a southwesterly wind might keep them short, but I think somewhere away from the Delaware River on Friday hits 90. I think there'll be at least 190 within the state borders on Wednesday, or on Friday. So that's my hot take of the day. Kevin.
It looks like it might rain in Central Africa.
Ask them to share. Yes.
And you may not know the answer to this. You were showing the drought monitor earlier and talking about how it's been dry in south central Pennsylvania. Between that and the potential for the heat this week, do you know, and you may not know this, could that impact the apple harvest in the fall?
That is a great question.
What a fantastic question.
How does this impact climate change?
Is it gonna destroy the apple growth?
You think this will impact contrast?
My hunch is no, as long as there's no like 28-degree night next week that follows. I don't know that early warmth is bad unless
Unless it follows,
it gets
followed by
that.
freezes.
That's my hunch.
I was saying, I know near me, there was, it was a few years ago, but it was early warmth and there was a.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone.
And so, yeah, all the bugs.
It's already 54. Hopefully you all can get out and enjoy some of the afternoon, but there's 5 more days to pick from.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
Round of applause for Ben.